My family has a little vacation home in Colorado. My parents are avid skiers, which was the motivating factor behind that purchase. The home has been in the family since before I was born. It's definitely showing its age in a lot of ways, but it's also like 40 years old. It's not going to look new. My dad's had to do a lot of upkeep on the place over the years. It's still in our family today, and it's really on its way out at this point. My dad talks about knocking it down and putting up a new place, but I don't really get involved in his decision. This story takes place like 15 years ago when I was 8 and my brother was 11. We were up in Colorado during a blizzard. The snowfall was insane, and of course my brother and I had to go out and play in it. The great thing about going up there when we were kids was the sheer amount of space. The property has a huge opening with woods surrounding in all directions. There's a dead-end road that goes downhill, which leads to a few more, almost equally big properties. It's the perfect layout for hide-and-seek, or snowball fights, or any number of games like that. My brother Josh and I went out in our snow gear to play our snowball fight game with our own little custom rules. Basically, we'd set up 2 forts. We could pick our forts to be anywhere, but we had to tell each other where we were picking. We would then make one giant snowball as the so-called jewel that we'd have to successfully steal from the other base and bring back to ours. Josh chose to make his base on the nearest neighboring property. There was almost never a car, like 9 times out of 10 that we'd go there, so we'd often play games on their property too since they were never there. What we'd do is build little walls to emulate a fort and then put the big snowball behind the walls. So to get to each other's bases in this game, we could either cut through the woods or take the road up or down to get to the opposite fort. Once Josh ran down the road and disappeared, I was supposed to wait for him to blow the whistle to signal that the game began. I waited for a while. Like, a long while. Over 5 minutes. He had already set up his fort by then, so all he had to do was get back down there and blow the whistle. When it hit around maybe the 10-minute mark is when I decided I probably just couldn't hear the whistle from there, so I started plotting my route. Was it better to go through the woods or down the road? I opted for the road because, honestly, going through the woods during a blizzard at 8 years old was a scary thought. I started trudging through the unplowed snow on the ground as flakes of snow blew into my face. With the amount of layers my mom made me put on, though, I wasn't cold at all. As I approached the driveway to the neighboring property, I looked through the trees and didn't see Josh over there. With all the brush and trees bare in the winter, it was quite easy to see through the woods. So I cut into the property through the trees to kind of sneak in, but Josh was literally nowhere in sight. I saw his fort, so I looked around. And when I could confirm he wasn't anywhere in sight, I approached his fort to grab the jewel. Before I could, I heard a woman's voice yelling out, "Excuse me, are you looking for your brother?" I turned in the direction it came from, and it was an older woman at the front door of the neighbor's house. I called back that we're playing a game. She responded with, "Your brother's in here." I was very confused. I started walking towards the front steps of the house, and as I got closer, the woman's face got clearer. To my 8-year-old mind, she looked a lot older than she probably was. As I got closer to the house, I noticed at one of the upstairs windows there was someone looking out at me. For a second, I actually thought it was Josh. It was someone with half their face covered, presumably by a black beanie, and the bottom part of their face covered under the bottom of the window. I also noticed another trail of footprints leading to the front door. They had to be Josh's. The woman was giving me a very creepy smile. I remember that feeling of my heart dropping for some reason. She waved me inside to come in and get out of the cold. I stopped dead in my tracks and screamed, "Josh!" But there was no response. I ran off the property back on the road, running through my previous footsteps. I started to hear my dad's whistling from up the hill. The whistling he'd do to get my brother and I home at dinner time. When I made it back to our driveway, my dad and Josh were there already, having been on their way to get me. Before I could even try to explain what just happened, Josh was already telling me that there were people in the neighbor's house telling him to come inside. I said the same exact thing happened to me, so my dad went down there with some kind of weapon in his hand while we waited in the home with our mom. He came back after a long while and said that the front door was locked and no one was answering, so we went to another neighbor's house, and they knew the owners of the house and they called them. This part still gives me chills whenever my dad mentions what he was told. The owners of that house were not there that weekend. Nobody was supposed to be in the house. The cops were called and everything, and my brother and I did have to speak to one of the officers on scene to describe the woman. After that, we were no longer involved. According to my dad, the back door was unlocked and the house was investigated, which turned up nothing. For this reason, my parents took home any extra valuable things in fear of a break-in while we were gone. After that day, we steered clear of playing on that property just from the creepiness factor of that memory alone. Thank God we didn't go in that house. If you want to send a personal true story of yours, please send it through email mentioned in description. Anything with poorly structured sentences and grammar will not be read, so please just make them neat and understandable. Please also state how you would like your name to be credited in a video.